my name is Karolina and this is video 1 of my midterm project for WST460. And today I will be discussing improper sex versus proper sex and improper sexual desires versus proper sexual desires. I've never had to create a video like this before. I'm just used to discussion boards and essays and quizzes and tests, so bear with me, but I'm gonna do my best. So the backbone of my argument will be from Gail Rubin's Thinking Sex, Notes for a Radical Theory of the Politics of Sexuality. She mentions just about everything in there that we see in society today and that we've seen throughout history, everything. So here goes. The obvious way to talk about or define improper sex versus proper sex is that there is no proper way. The sexual is political. There's always going to be something wrong. That's just how society is. We have societal norms, but with the generations changing and, everyone beginning to realize that there is a strong societal construct, we're trying to move away from that. But while we're trying to move away from that, there's also people that strongly stick to the historical societal constructs. So it's never really a win-win situation unless everyone just said, hey, go do what you do. But basing off of Gail Rubin's literary work, one way to talk about proper sex and proper sexual desires that has been deeply rooted by history and religion, and everyone seems to abide by it, is that a man and a woman should be together. And that's not to say that it's strictly just a man and a woman. It's more of a man and a woman after marriage. They can engage in sexual intercourse, and it's not frowned upon. But if a man and a woman engage in sexual intercourse beforehand, before getting married, then automatically that's frowned upon because the woman is looked at as promiscuous, and it honestly does weigh down more on the woman than it does the man, because in society, even with history involved, men aren't really criticized for their sexual activities as much as women are. So then segueing off of that, homosexuality, that would be considered an improper sexual desire. So the reason that earlier I said that everyone kind of bases off of the proper sex as being man and woman, that's not to say that everyone thinks that's how it should be, but even homosexuals see themselves arguing and fighting against society's criticism for their homosexuality. So while consciously they don't abide by it, subconsciously in the back of their mind, they know that it's like, okay, this is what I'm gonna have to deal with. This is the norm. They know that is the norm. Another improper sexual desire is like kinky sex. So I don't want to go too much into 50 Shades of Grey because I know everyone's seen that and heard of that, and you're all probably going to get sick of it if I start talking about it. So I'm just going to say 50 Shades of Grey. And, sex toys, masturbation, just stuff that we would consider freaky, being freaky with someone. That would be considered improper. But at the same time, it makes me wonder, well, it's considered improper, but who is to say that it's considered improper, We all have different ideas of what is freaky and what is not freaky, so it kind of places anyone in a tough spot. But at the same time, sexual intimacy with another person is a private matter. So no one's really going to know. But if you, for example, let's say I'm going to throw myself under the bus here. The other day I was telling my friend about, things that I did with my boyfriend, and she's like, "Oh my God, you're such a freak. Like, that's so nasty." And I was just sitting there and I was thinking to myself, I don't understand how that is, because then when I was talking to another friend, she started talking about how her and her boyfriend did almost the same thing. So it varies. And that's the thing about society that, that we all seem to forget, is that it's like, yeah, we have these things that are considered improper or proper, but it's different for everybody. There's a norm, but, as more, more generations come to this world, and students like you and I learn more about these kinds of issues, and we brought in our perspectives, the lines are blurred. So let's go into something that is more likely to be agreed that it is a improper sexual desire. So, for example, incest. That, as Gail Rubin has mentioned in her writing, is considered improper religiously, and historically has been considered improper. And I would think that a lot of people nowadays would agree so too, but there are cultures where people do that, and for them it's considered proper, and they don't see it as a big deal. But sex desiring your little brother or your older brother, or your sibling, is something that will mainly be considered an improper sexual desire, and everyone will look down on it, and people will be criticized, they will be judged. As far as homosexuality goes, yeah, that's criticized widely, and they're facing a lot of issues as far as being accepted. But I think that with society today and society in general, somehow society is shifting towards accepting homosexuals. But as far as incest goes, I personally do not think that that is something that would ever be accepted. And maybe homosexuality one day will be considered the norm for a proper sexual desire and proper sex, because I feel like we're shifting away from that improper sexual desire, improper sex, as far as society goes, and as far as society defines it and how society looks at it. But I don't know about incest. Another improper sexual desire would be children in general. I'm not going to talk about yet, an older man, a younger girl, or an older woman and an underage boy. Yeah, I'm not going to go into that, but just kids in general. If kids are talking with each other about sex, then automatically, parents freak out and teachers freak out, and, sex ed has even been taken out of school curriculums, but it is also a natural thing for young minds, young kids, when they hit puberty or right before they hit puberty, to ask questions and to want to explore their bodies. And that's supposed to be considered natural, but there is a fine line created by psychologists and just by society of what would be considered normal or not normal. And so, I hear about kids in elementary school having sex. A few years ago, I wouldn't hear that so much, and now I do. And it kind of makes me wonder, and it's interesting to me, why? Is it because we stopped talking about it? Or is it because kids are getting more curious because their questions aren't being answered, so they go out and they try these things on their own? Or is it what everyone says, you know, mainstream media, like hip hop, music, movies? You know, that's just one thing that I've been wondering about for quite a while, because it just amazes me. You know, I have a little cousin and she came home and she began talking to me about sex, and I was just like, what? Like, I don't know, but things are definitely changing as far as that goes as well. But as far as it being proper sex versus improper sex, someone my age or a psychologist may say that it's improper, but for them, they think it's normal. And even another psychologist might even say on the contrary, well, you know, this is normal because they're exploring their bodies. It's natural for them to be curious. It's natural for them to want to know. But then again, at the same time, there are boundaries. So where is the boundary placed? As with everything that I had mentioned earlier, there are boundaries. And so, you know, a girl wondering about male body parts versus a girl harassing a boy to take off his pants so she can see what he has. Would that be considered a boundary line, or is it strictly, you know, kids, no sex, no sexual desires, no thoughts about sex, none of that, although it's a natural thing. Another improper sexual desire would be, like I had mentioned earlier briefly, an older man and an underage girl. This can be mentioned in different ways. You know, I can say a father and his daughter, and that would be considered incest, and it would fall into that category. Or, you know, a 30-year-old man and a 15-year-old girl. That would be considered improper sex. And when I really think about it, I think about other cultures, you know, because here it's considered improper. But what about other countries? You know, in other countries, you hear about 14-year-old girls being given away by their parents to marry an older man. So for them, that would be considered proper, whereas for us, it would be considered improper. So I don't know if I'm doing a good job at explaining this, but what I'm trying to say is the reason I keep going back and forth as I'm talking about all this stuff is so you can kind of see that it varies. It's going to vary for everything. And, you know, while there is like a foundation for what is considered proper and what is considered improper, at the end of the day, it's all fair game. It depends about perspective, it depends about culture, it depends about how you grew up, it depends about where you grew up, even with norms, because not everything is the norm everywhere, if that makes sense. Like, not every culture has the same norm. America is going to look at things differently than people in Africa. So that depends. But as far as proper sex goes, reproduction, I would think is a universal proper sexual desire. Because even in countries where, you know, girls' clitorises are cut off so that they can't feel orgasms, they're still expected to reproduce. And it's between a man and a woman, strictly reproduction. And that completely takes out, you know, how sex is supposed to be something that makes us feel good, and makes it strictly biology. I hope that you guys kind of got a better understanding of this, or I hope that you like my examples. So thank you for watching, and I will be posting my second video shortly.